What up, what up, what up? Day late. Day late. It is currently May 2nd, at around 1 in the morning. And that's normally, I normally do this kind of video on the 1st of every month, but I'm doing it on the 2nd of this month. Because today is my birthday. So yes, my birthday is on May 2nd, which is actually today. Yesterday was May 1st, so like the entire day I was awake. I went to school. It was May 1st. Now I stayed up. It was midnight. It's May 2nd now. So technically most of my birthday is going to be tomorrow when I wake up. But I wanted to get on and just outline my April. How April was, kind of thoughts I've been having, and kind of do another newsletter. So let's think. Can't exactly remember where I left off when describing March. But March, pretty crazy month for me. February, pretty crazy month for me. April, you guessed it, pretty crazy month for me. I wouldn't say as crazy as February and March, because I would say I was pretty tired throughout much of April, pretty exhausted. But the main kind of thing going on in April was Earthshots, which is a TKS challenge, kind of like Pi, but kind of like just come up with an idea you want to work on and kind of just go work on it. It's supposed to be an idea that you can implement relatively easily, and it was kind of a, I don't know, it was kind of a strange challenge for me, because normally I work somewhat by myself for a challenge like that, or like I work with a team of just a couple friends, and it isn't really as reliant on the team. Like normally I do a lot of the work at least by myself, but this one I worked with a team of people who are pretty good. They kind of know what's going on, so I had to work with them. And I'm not really a great team worker. I don't exactly know why. I'm not great at it. I normally like to do things a certain way, and most people can't understand that. And I don't, like, this team was great, but I don't know that they quite understood it, or I didn't do a great job at communicating what I wanted or what we needed to get done, or maybe I just didn't do enough myself. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think it was a good challenge. We did it. I think we have a good idea that we can keep working on. I'm not exactly sure if I want to keep working on it. Still kind of thinking about it, because it is a pretty difficult idea. I'll explain it. So this is an idea I had a long time ago, like a couple months ago. And it revolved around this kind of report that came out around contrails. Contrails, which are those little clouds that come out of the back of airplanes. And it turns out that contrails are actually pretty bad for the environment. Not in that they're emissions, like there's no carbon dioxide at all, no carbon emissions in contrails. Contrails are literally just little pellets of ice that form cirrus clouds up high in the sky where airplanes fly. But cirrus clouds, just like a greenhouse gas, reflect a significant amount of infrared light back towards the Earth. Infrared light that would normally escape. And this effect isn't really the greenhouse effect. It's what most people think of when they think of the greenhouse effect, because I would say most people don't actually understand the greenhouse effect. Like, they have no idea how it actually works. Like, they understand the basics, why it's caused, but 99% of people, even in the space of climate tech, I would say have no idea how the greenhouse effect actually works, because this effect from cirrus clouds is what's called the radiative forcing effect. And the radiative forcing effect is what most people think of when they think of the greenhouse effect. And the easiest way to describe how it works is UV light, which is normally in a shorter wavelength, comes from the sun. Normally shorter wavelengths of light come from the sun. They have more energy, radiation, all of that. Lots of it gets absorbed in the upper layers of the atmosphere. So the stratosphere will normally absorb a lot of dangerous radiation to humans, dangerous radiation to life on Earth, and prevent it from actually getting down. But because the sun emits so many different wavelengths of light, normally what does end up getting through the stratosphere is UV light, which is what we can see. Well, it's not exactly what we can see. It's what we can see after it bounces off of something. So the visible spectrum of light is kind of right lower than UV, but UV, once it comes down, it starts bouncing off of stuff, loses a bit of energy, loses some energy so that we can actually see it. And what happens with that, what happens with these shorter wavelengths of light is as they reflect off of things, they give a little bit of energy, you can think of it like that. They become a bit longer in wavelength, they reflect off. Eventually, how the cycle kind of works is you get to the infrared spectrum of light, which is just behind what we can see. So if UV's a bit shorter wavelength of what we can see, infrared is a bit longer. And most infrared light, or actually most of the light that the Earth emits or reflects back off into space, that actually comes down to the Earth and isn't reflected by the stratosphere, is infrared light. And infrared light can also have the same effect as UV light, as in it can heat things. But most of how the lower level of the atmosphere, which we live in, which is the troposphere, is heated, is from infrared light trying to escape. And you can think of it like this, right? Any greenhouse gas, any cloud, anything in the sky that's going to reflect infrared light, right? Let's say an infrared light particle hits it. There's a 50-50 chance about that the thing will reflect it back down or the thing will reflect it up, right? So like it's not like greenhouse gases or clouds automatically reflect all of this stuff back down. No, they just have a higher likelihood of reflecting it. So if you can think about it, a very small percentage of the infrared light will just escape. It won't hit anything, or anything it will hit will reflect it up. But because there's so much of it, it will actually have higher chances of reflecting it down. And then this is kind of a hard thing, at least for me to understand, because I would say I definitely didn't understand the greenhouse effect until I actually started looking into this problem. But what this means is that the location of carbon dioxide or the location of carbon dioxide or any kind of greenhouse gas really, I'm sorry, I was just getting some Slack messages that I gotta read. I'll update you later. Actually, okay. I'll explain that real quick. I'm supposed to go speak at another conference. Naveed, who's the founder of TKS, I'm going to C2 in Montreal with CAE, who I did the Pi Challenge with, and he's just messaging me some info that I really want to see. Okay, never mind. Okay, so back to what I was talking about. The location of carbon dioxide, greenhouse gases, clouds, anything that's going to reflect energy back towards the Earth matters. Because if you think about it, how the Earth is actually mostly heated is from the atmosphere, or just from stuff absorbing light, right? So let's say you have carbon dioxide at a lower level in the atmosphere. If we emit carbon dioxide right here, there's less of a likelihood that the light it's reflecting back won't normally be reflected back. So if you think about it as a process of likelihoods, how likely is this light particle here at the lowest level of the troposphere, how likely is it to be reflected back down and actually heat up more of the atmosphere? Pretty likely anyway, there's already plenty of things to reflect it back down here. But as you get carbon dioxide at higher levels, it starts reflecting that backlight, infrared light that normally shouldn't be reflected. And this is why cirrus clouds can have such a big impact, because cirrus clouds are up high at the highest levels of the stratosphere. And cirrus clouds are normal, right? Like they're the clouds, they're wispy, they're high up, you can see them. They're normal. They actually contribute to about 10 degrees in warming of the Earth, 10 degrees Celsius, which is huge because it makes the Earth habitable. But once you start adding more, which these planes do, it's kind of in a way more potent area to actually reflect light back that shouldn't be reflected back at all. And this has kind of got me thinking about the whole deal of like atmospheric climate tech. Like I was thinking about it, like when you think of it like that, where these contrails actually have a huge effect. Not that so firstly, this means that not every contrail actually matters. So I would still say personally contrails aren't bad. But every once in a while you get a radiative forcing contrail, which is basically a runaway effect of contrail creation. So how contrail is actually created, if you think so, up high in the atmosphere, that high, it's cold, it's really cold, and there's a significant amount of water vapor. But the water vapor can't just freeze because it has nothing to freeze on. So the pressure is so low up there that it needs higher pressure to freeze on. But when you get a little particle of soot or a little particle of anything, even aerosols, they artificially increase the pressure around them because there's more interaction with them. And when that pressure increases, it allows the cold enough air with water vapor in it to freeze around it in that specific location. And that's called nucleation. And that's why all the atmospheric water vapor doesn't just freeze up there, and why contrails can actually be created by planes, because they release little particles of soot, little aerosols, all of that allow the water vapor to freeze around it. But every once in a while you'll get a radiative forcing contrail, which basically creates a runaway effect of that, where the contrail itself starts to allow higher pressure in other areas beside the contrail, which allows it to spread out into a massive carpet. And you can see these things from space. You can see these contrails from space over the North Atlantic flying routes, even lower southern over Florida, but mostly it's in pretty consistent areas where these runaway contrails kind of are created. And also, because of that, they have the highest effect that shouldn't be happening. And this is why it got me thinking, right? Because couple startups are looking into reducing the effect of contrails, right? Let's say we can do that. Not all contrails matter, right? Like if we go back to thinking about it like likelihoods, if there's a contrail up in the sky where light's going to be reflected back anyway by another cirrus cloud, it doesn't matter, right? We don't need to get rid of that contrail. But most people look at it, they just look at it right like that, because they don't really actually understand how the atmosphere holds in heat and why holding in heat like that actually matters. So my angle on it was say, hey, let's look at the contrails that actually matter. We can probably predict them, right? You need a lot of data, but once you can actually start predicting them, I'm guessing that it's under 0.34% of flights will have to actually change. And the way you change to not make a contrail is to fly lower. Fly lower somewhere warmer, that won't create a contrail. Fly around an area of low pressure, that's likely to create a runaway forcing effect of contrails, or fly higher. And this is where it gets kind of weird, because if you look at a graph of temperature in the atmosphere, it'll go like this. It'll go low, 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 low as you get up higher in the troposphere. But once you hit the stratosphere, it gets warmer. It gets warmer. And you can think of the stratosphere, well, it is another layer of atmosphere, right? Like, it's almost like another layer of atmosphere on top of another Earth. like you can think of the very upper parts of the troposphere as basically another surface of the Earth, because the upper level of the stratosphere is actually significantly warm. It's pretty warm, and there's actually quite a bit of pressure there. So most planes don't actually fly in the lower levels of the stratosphere, even though it's higher, because it's actually less efficient to fly there too. So when you look into planes that fly high, all the new planes, 787s, they're getting to the higher upper heights of the troposphere. But if you look back at supersonic flights, flights that fly high, like the Concorde, they had to fly higher than the lower level of the stratosphere to get to the upper level of the stratosphere, where it's even lower pressure than the upper level of the troposphere, if you can think about it like that. But what this actually means is that there's kind of a limit to where carbon dioxide can go and to where infrared light will be reflected back and where it matters. Because if infrared light's reflected back in the stratosphere, it doesn't really matter because it won't really heat the Earth down here. In fact, warming the stratosphere actually has a cooling effect on the troposphere down here, which is counterintuitive, and it goes the other way too. Stratospheric cooling warms the troposphere down here, and that's basically what proved the greenhouse effect kind of theory as true. It proved it as true, and it basically gave us an understanding of why the greenhouse effect actually happens and why it actually matters. Because when we first started thinking about the greenhouse effect, we thought about it like the radiative forcing effect, or how most people think about the greenhouse effect now. That light that should be going out just gets reflected back. We don't actually think about the location of where that light is or whether it actually matters. But we did observe that UV light that's normally absorbed and then reflected back to space by ozone in the stratosphere, when you cool that area down, you create less pressure, which actually allows more UV light in. So when you heat it up, when there's more stuff up there to absorb the UV light, less the UV light gets down to Earth. So it's a really, really weird balance. And whenever you mess with the flight route of a plane to get around making a contrail, it's normally less efficient for the flight. So firstly, more expensive to fly, right? But because it's less efficient, that also means that there's more carbon emissions. And carbon emissions last for hundreds of thousands of years. Contrails last for 10 minutes on the lowest end, and then once you get to radiative forcing, they can last from weeks to a couple months. So there's a very, very delicate balance that has to be looked into if we're going to actually mitigate these contrails. And my thoughts around it are that, there's kind of a little bit of growing hype around contrails being bad, or contrails actually having an effect. It kind of blindsides people when they first hear about it. But we need to take into effect how we're going to actually remove their effect rationally. Because so the UK government, the EU's, they're theorizing about just banning contrails. That would be terrible. Firstly, airlines, that would be way too expensive for them. They're not going to do it. They're going to try to argue their way out of it. It's going to be a whole deal. Even then, let's say they ban contrails. Airlines will be flying less efficient routes and emitting more carbon, right? That could actually be worse for the environment. So we need to look at this from a perspective of actually knowing how atmospheric climate works, and not just kind of the reactionary side of it, which got me thinking about climate tech a bit differently, right? Like, I always kind of knew that climate tech was kind of BS. There's a lot of people in climate tech, climate science, but I would say most of them don't actually understand how it works. They can understand the effects of why, they don't understand why things happen, they just understand what happens, right? And eventually we got to look into why things happen so that we don't mess up banning contrails, because contrails, they have an estimated warming of the stratosphere by 3 to 4 degrees Celsius, which is huge. And we actually saw during COVID, when basically all transatlantic flights dropped, we saw a significant drop in tropospheric temperature. I think I said stratosphere before with the 3 to 4 degrees, but it's troposphere. We saw a significant drop in tropospheric temperature. because these contrails weren't being created anymore. So it's a very, if we can if we get rid of the contrails that actually matter, it is a very easy way to basically stop the greenhouse effect, stop what happens from the greenhouse effect, which is a warming of the troposphere. Very easy. We just need to get those 0.34% of contrails that actually matter. So that's what I was working on during Earthshots. And like I was saying before, I was with a team of 2 other people who, like, they're pretty good at stuff like this. But the thing is that I find, and I kind of learned this about myself, the way I just described it to you, of how it works, doesn't really sound that good from a challenge perspective, right? So, like, this idea was mine. I said earlier, I had this a couple months ago, and I came into Earthshots and I'm saying, like, hey, this could be a good idea. And normally, just because of the teams I'm on, whatever idea I come up with, I just go with it, right? But these guys were a bit more critical, wanted to look into other ideas a bit more, which is fine. Like, that's totally fine. But what I realized over time, just working with them, is that I don't think we ever fully agreed on what we wanted this idea to be, right? Because if it's originally mine, it would be on me to kind of describe it that way and say, hey, this is what it's going to be. But I just didn't do that, because again, I'm not a great team worker, and I kind of thought that they would pick up on it, but they didn't. And it kind of turned into something that it shouldn't be. Well, it turned into, so I'll say, it turned into something that just sounds nice. It sounds nice for the challenge, but at the end of the day, I think it's BS. What this idea has to be, and what I think is most useful for us, is it's not something we can necessarily implement right now. We can't make an algorithm that says, hey, this is how you're going to make less contrails, right? We need to implement an algorithm and look into, and basically just make it right now. Say, hey, this is how these are the contrails that matter. Because getting rid of the contrails that matter is pretty easy, but we need to prove why they matter, which matters way more. We can't just come out here and say contrail is bad, say ban them, because that's counterintuitive. It doesn't work. But that's kind of the easiest route, and I don't think we ever fully agreed on, hey, like, this is what we gotta do. Which is mostly my fault. But yeah, I mean, our group did very well in Earthshots. I think, like, I didn't really care about the challenge. I think they might have wanted to win, just because of the track record I have with challenges. Maybe they assumed I wanted to, and even though, like, I honestly don't care about winning the challenges. Like, I want an honestly interesting idea from me. And generally, I don't think what sounds good is very actually, like, what sounds good externally that you can explain quickly in a 5-minute pitch deck, I don't think that's generally what's very interesting. And what I found is that literally just talking about it for 5 minutes, just sometimes it just happens to win the challenge if you have something actually interesting. Like, you can't really BS your way through those challenges. But sorry, just trying to make sure that my phone's plugged in so it doesn't die. But yeah, that's kind of what I worked on over April. Because of how long it took us to actually choose this idea, it means that we kind of had another idea revolving around fertilizers, which I think I might have explained in one of my videos, or why fertilizers matter, because this is actually, I think, the scariest problem I've come across, where the Haber-Bosch process of making fertilizers is basically an artificial way to increase fixing of ammonia in soil for plants. Normally, plants can't fix their own nitrogen, they can't fix their own they can't fix their own nitrogen, they can't fix their own potassium, and they can't fix their own phosphorus. Which means that in the soil there's actually a huge, massive, thriving ecosystem of different bacteria that actually do that. Because nitrogen by itself is not an organic compound, potassium by itself is not an organic compound, and phosphorus by itself generally isn't an organic compound, which means that it's very hard to actually break them down and build them up. And really the only organisms good at that are bacteria. So you need very specialized bacteria in the soil to actually do that. And plants have evolved over billions of years to have that relationship with plants. Many plants who are good at it and don't need fertilizer, such as legumes, beans, they're good at it because they actually have a symbiotic relationship with the bacteria in their root system. So they physically take in the bacteria in their root system. It's almost like endosymbiosis, or the beginning stages of it, where endosymbiosis is kind of how cells absorb the mitochondria, which was originally generally like a bacteria. It's kind of like the beginning stages of that endosymbiosis. But because of this, because it's so hard for the bacteria, and because the plants can't do it themselves, it generally takes a long time for nutrients of any kind, phosphorus, potassium, nitrogen, to make their way into organic forms that the plants can use to grow. And generally, these nutrients come from weird places. A lot of nitrogen that plants use is just atmospheric N2, which is all over the place, but plants can't use the N2. They need it in a form of ammonia, they need it in all that, which has to go through the bacteria. So what fertilizers actually do is they artificially increase this process. So when you can make ammonia to just put in fertilizer, which most plants can use ammonia, it's actually kind of weird. Like because ammonia itself is toxic. Like it'll strip away hydrogen from a phospholipid bilayer of a plant, all of that. But if you have it in low concentrations in a plant, it's all right. So different plants have different kind of variabilities of ammonia levels they want, or different kind of forms of nitrogen, so it's not toxic. But if we can make that artificially and just put it into the soil, it'll remove the need for these bacteria to physically break down the ammonia itself, which increases the amount of time and the size that plants can grow in exponentially. It makes it massive. And this is the Haber-Bosch process, invented by Haber in Germany. Haber was a weird guy. He, in a way, he saved the world. At the time, before that process was invented, the world was screwed. They were coming up among what would be a global famine that would probably kill millions. They just kind of finished just getting through the Great Depression before World War II, the Dust Bowl epidemic in North America, which basically was the beginning stages of a famine or crops not growing properly. Haber kind of saved the bacon for humanity with that. Because what they were doing before is they would take what's called guano, which is just bird poo. Bird poo has a significant amount of ammonia in it, along with other things. So normally like crap, like poo is like a good fertilizer. But especially it's good from birds because birds don't actually pee. They release their pee in their poo, which is what makes it white. So ammonia, normally, ammonia, urea, all of that has a lot of nitrogen, and normally humans, most other animals, we pee it out. But because birds don't pee, it's kind of all wrapped up in one place. Guano normally dries on islands into this kind of white cake that you can just take and spread onto your field, and it's just like an early form of fertilizer. And we were running out of that too, right after the Dust Bowl was kind of finishing off. So we were fucked. But Haber made this process, and it kind of scaled out. Haber did some other kind of questionable stuff. He made, I think it was mustard gas. Not exactly sure. It was one of the gases they used in World War II for the Nazi side, and then he made the gas. It was some form of chlorine gas that they used to gas everyone in the concentration camps. So Haber, not necessarily a great guy, but he did kind of save the world. But he saved the world, but he also might have ruined it later on for the same reasons, because as myself, as a man kind of the bacteria, that's mostly what I'm interested in. I'm not a huge agriculture guy. There's actually this effect that we've kind of created where the plants have become reliant on these fertilizers because they've removed the need for any interaction with bacteria that would normally fix things for them, because we're just giving them the nutrients they need in their fertilizers, which means that without fertilizers, most plants we've cultivated nowadays can't grow. And this is bad for a few reasons, because firstly, fertilizer is getting more expensive. On one hand, that is because there is more demand for fertilizers. So as plants become more reliant on fertilizers, they actually need more. And because we're growing more plants, we need more again. But then also, on the other side, they're getting more expensive because we're physically running out of the materials we need to make these fertilizers. Sure, there's a lot of nitrogen, right? Hydrogen, freaking hard to come across, but you need the hydrogen to make the ammonia. Potassium, we're running out of it. It's actually very hard to mine, and many countries where potassium actually is are kind of in a little bit of a global conflict right now. Ukraine, Russia, Eastern Europe, they're huge potassium producers, but it's kind of getting more difficult for them to actually create it. And then phosphorus. Phosphorus in a form that's easy to use and put in a fertilizer is very, very, very hard to come across. And we are physically, at the rate we're using it, we are physically going to run out by 2050 of phosphorus to use for fertilizers. And it's coming hard to come across, which is making fertilizers even more expensive right now. And what this means is that we've kind of become too reliant on this process, and the plants have become too reliant on the Haber process, which isn't actually that great for them at the end of the day. Because if you can think of potassium and phosphorus and nitrogen as the main nutrients that plants need to grow, generally every plant needs to grow, they all need those nutrients. Specific plants need specific other nutrients that the bacteria also make. But we don't know, we haven't specialized it like that. We don't have a specific fertilizer for tomatoes that gives it all the exact nutrients it needs. And as they're losing these bacteria that generally give the tomatoes the specialized nutrients that they need, as they're losing that, the tomatoes are growing fine, but just without those nutrients. So if you look at the actual nutrients of plants, of produce, over the past 100 years, it has gone down significantly. The protein content of produce has gone down somewhere between 12 and to 50% since the 60s, which means the food we're eating is just less nutritious, right? And this got me thinking, right? This got me thinking about the whole obesity epidemic. I'm not exactly sure how the body's metabolism works, but if you can think of it like this, the kind of carbohydrate content, the starch content of the plants is the same because they physically have the building block materials from fertilizers of nutrients that they need. But the nutrients that our bodies need, the special nutrients from fruits and vegetables, aren't there as much. So we have to eat more, even though we're growing more plants, we're growing bigger plants, we have to eat more of them to get the same amount of nutrients as before, which means we're also getting more of the carbohydrates, more of the starch that makes you fat. And this generally just got me wondering, like, firstly, if this is going to get worse over time, we might just have a nutrient collapse where the food we're making just cannot, like, we can make as much of the food as we want, but it cannot sustain us. And then on the other hand, how much of the obesity epidemic can be pointed towards this, right? Like, most older people will say that food nowadays just doesn't taste the same as it used to. Um, Generally, taste I would think has a big impact on the obesity epidemic. Like it's social. Like it's physically human. What we want to eat. We're used to eating what we like because normally what we like is good for us. But because what's good for us has kind of gone away because we're not growing it properly anymore. People are turning to artificial means of it, which just generally isn't good for you. And then when they do actually eat fruits and vegetables, they're not getting nearly as much of the nutrients as they should from those. And then they have to eat more, and then they get more carbohydrates from it, all that, which they generally can't process. Which got me thinking of pretty much how screwed we are. Corn as a crop, wheat as a crop, we've cultivated them, we've domesticated it, basically made them into new crops. And we've now cultivated them in a way that's made pretty much every strain reliant on these fertilizers. So if we run out of fertilizers, we can't grow anymore, and then even the ones that we can grow, let's say we didn't run out of fertilizers, can't sustain us. And this is down to how the plants actually use these fertilizers. Again, it's kind of a band-aid solution how we use these fertilizers. We just spread every kind of nutrients that the plant might need onto it, and the plants mostly don't use most of it, which again leads to a lot of it leaching out into water, which leads to harmful algae blooms. It can also leach in with heavy metals, which leads to poisoning water wells. Algae blooms poison water wells, all of that. Like generally all of this leaching off is bad. But then also nitrous oxides are a huge emission of these fertilizers because bacteria that isn't attached to the plant will break down extra ammonia into nitrous oxides, which get released from farmland into the air, which is a potent greenhouse gas. So if you think about it, we've basically backed our agriculture sector into a corner where we need these fertilizers that we're making that are harming us at every single corner now. At every single corner. And this got me thinking because our whole Western world, everything we've done, all this technology, all of these different jobs that we've started doing is because we have less people working in the farmlands, right? We have less people working on farms to feed us. But we need way more attention to be put on these actual farms. We need more farmers. We need way more people farming. But our whole society is based off the fact that we have less. Our whole progress as a human species is based on having less farmers, having to worry about it less. And we've screwed ourselves because of it. People won't go back to the farmers' fields. It's not glamorous, but it's what we need. And most ag tech solutions in the agriculture space are sort of just based around trying to remedy it. And ag tech solutions are notoriously hard to implement and have a notoriously low impact. And I would say it's because we have a fundamentally wrong system of growing food. I think we need to stop using fertilizers completely. The environment that we grow plants in cannot handle fertilizer runoff. The plants themselves cannot handle taking nutrients from fertilizers in not a natural way. And then also our bodies can't handle it. The only thing that can handle it and the only thing that justifies it is the bottom line of having less people working in a farmer's field. But we seriously need to look into using much less fertilizer, and it's getting more expensive over time. I think it's going to be a huge deal, and that was kind of a very scary realization I came across, that hey, like ag tech solutions aren't really doing anything, and it's because the system is fundamentally screwed up. The main system of life is messed up, and something has to be done about it. But I don't know. Had to pivot away from that for Earthshots because there's nothing really we can do. Nothing really we can do. Which I guess now that I think about it, like it makes me kind of want to go into at least people area more, or like politics more, because I think that's where it needs to get done, where we need to get people looking into it saying, hey, like this is, we need leaders, not like smart people who work on problems, but leaders to change the narrative around that, because we're in trouble. We are in massive trouble because of that. Let's say we solve the climate crisis, that's going to be the next big thing, and it does also contribute massively to the climate crisis. But yeah, so that was an idea we kind of pivoted away from in our shots, just because of how huge it is, how big of a deal it is, but it's kind of been on my mind for a while. These fertilizers, man, not good at all. But with that, pivoted back to contrails, which I think is also kind of interesting. But again, I don't know how easy it'll be to work on. But ever since Earthshots ended, that's kind of it for TKS in a way. Like the TKS challenges, we have a showcase of what we've worked on the whole time, in midway through June. So basically our time now is to work on getting ready for that, which is basically just my focus project, purple hydrogen from the bacteria. I'm definitely going to go back to GDS, so GDS simulation, fixing GDS, airline operations, all that, just because that's something still pretty easy to do, and I think it's pretty cool. Like, I like aviation and all that. But I'm just trying to think about where contrails fit into this, because I think it would be something cool to work on. But I think that ultimately the best case scenario of continuing to work on contrails is making the algorithm, right? Making the kind of baseline of an algorithm, baseline of the idea of how you reduce the contrails that matter, without ever being able to implement it, because the airlines just aren't ready for it yet. No one's ready for it yet because it doesn't have a massive impact yet. No one started banning the contrails yet. And we basically need to wait until 2025, 2028, when the bans start kicking in, when there's more scrutiny on them, to where airlines will actually start caring about banning them. So we could make it say, hey, we told you so, like, here's how you do it. Be the experts on it, which I think is cool, and I think that's what I actually might end up wanting to work on, but taking steps towards implementing it is probably hard. Which makes me wonder if it's the best thing to work on right now. Because also, funny enough, I have this other thing that I do with my life, that I've done with my whole life, which is called school, which I really haven't focused on for a long time. And with this kind of open road, I'm looking forward to working a little bit on GDS, which I'm going to work on over the summer with CAE anyway, and I'm going to go to C2 at the end of May, a conference with CAE, do a talk physically with them about the idea, all that, work on implementing that. Shouldn't be too hard until I actually start working on it in the summer. Work on getting purple sulfur bacteria, continuing to research it. I want to build the website, Dark Purple Sulfur Bacteria. I don't know if I've explained that yet, but Dark Purple Sulfur Bacteria, sulfur, hydrogen from sargassum, those blooms, all that. I want to build that out. Shouldn't be too hard, just a lot of writing, which I do like writing and getting my ideas out there, along with a bit of research on the bacteria, and then focusing on my school. That's what I want to do with the next while. Focus on just getting, not like getting better at school, like my grades are kind of in the area of unrecoverable, you could say, to a point where they're actually good, which doesn't really matter right now. It's grade 11. But I do want to be able to get those habits ready, so I could be like, hey, like, you know, if I find that I want to crush through a few courses, get really good marks to get into a program, that I just can't do it, that I can just do it next year. But yeah, I like to keep my doors open, have all of those angles ready. But that's kind of what I'm thinking of. Working on the bacteria, working on the GDS idea, maybe working on contrails here and there, and focusing on school for sure. Ending off grade 11 good. And then what comes next? But now that I think about it, there's not a lot of time left in the year. 2 months until the summer. Yeah, 2 months until the summer when I'm when I start my job with CAE, working on GDS. Huh. Yeah, this is kind of the weird part where you feel kind of not aimless. Like, I know what I want to do, but there's no kind of end hoop in sight. Like, there's no kind of end challenge hoop in sight where I say, hey, I'm gonna have a deliverable done by here to show to judges, which I think I might want to artificially create with myself for Purple Hydrogen and for GDS. So now that I think about it, I think by the end of May, I want to be meeting with CAE and then like actually hammering out the ideas of our job with my teammates. And then for Purple Sulfur, I want to get it ready for showcase day or demo day for TKS, but then also to bring it to Ontario Tech University to actually study the bacteria. I want to have it ready enough for that, so I know enough about the bacteria. I have the website out there, the ideas there, process patent, all of that ready, just so I have it, which is now the goals I'm thinking of. Well, which now that I think of, school might not have to play a huge role or be a huge limiting factor in that. Weirdly, the kind of marks I've been getting over the past week or two have actually been kind of good, even though I was at the end of Earthshots where I was working really hard. But yeah, kind of almost proved to myself that, you know, I could still be good at school if I want to. Even though, I don't know, like, again, it's just, I don't feel fulfilled at all when focusing on school. Like, there's no rhyme or reason to what I'm learning. What I'm learning isn't actually very valuable, and I mostly forget it. And I feel like when I do it, I'm just changing myself, and I've noticed, or what I've learned kind of over COVID, is that I have a really hard time changing myself, and I generally don't think it's good for me to change, to be someone I'm not, to get an outcome of maybe a good school report, because that's just not who I am. I just do not live a good life like that. But that's kind of what people expect of me, so yeah, there's that. Because the thing is, like, most people think about at least school as a means to an end, high school as a means to an end of getting into a good university. But I've done my best to try to look into what a good university is, and I don't know. And I think most of what people think of as good universities is just based off of nonsense, which doesn't actually matter. And like, generally, universities with high test scores or like good outcomes are cool and all, but if you need good marks to get in, and I have to change myself into someone I'm not to get those good marks to get in, I don't think it's a right fit for me, even if I can do it. And I think fit is what matters most for me, even though the expectations are kind of different. But yeah, that's kind of been the weird part of my life, where it's like, at least, especially recently, I really realized like how little people actually not actually know me. Like, I think I've done a pretty good job of getting myself out there, like being the true version of myself to people, but how little people are ready for that. Like, how the expectations generally don't align with that at all. They align with some older version of me, or some cookie cutter just teenager, which means a lot of the time people are disappointed when they see my grades. Like, especially my teachers are disappointed, and they're like, hey, like, you can get into a better school, but I don't think they understand that that's not what I want, and that's not what is good for me. because schools aren't the limiting factor of what you can learn. And what I'm learning in school right now is useless and not fulfilling at all. And I much prefer learning by myself. So if I can't go to a good school because of that, if they don't appreciate me trying to learn my best by myself, and I can't go to a good school and I can't get a good looking piece of paper because of that, then so be it. That's fine. I'll figure it out on my own. And that's just how it'll have to be. But yeah. So I'm 17 now. Turned 17 today. Kind of weird, honestly. Was not really ready for it at all. Kind of forgot my birthday was coming up for a while. Just because kind of been busy and all. But yeah. That's kind of my thoughts. What's been going on over April. I think I've been talking to people while like just getting out there more, but I don't know what it is. I feel kind of this, not anxiety, not even like depression from like 2020, end of 2021, early 2022 creeping. It's weird. It's like almost a feeling of hopelessness, which I think I maybe did get last year, but maybe I just didn't realize it, dealing with what I did over the winter, coming out of the winter. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's not a lot of people who understand it or understand me, and I think I almost gave too many people too much credit in that regard, and I listen to them too much, and they get in my head almost, which just affects me poorly. But yeah, especially kind of weird around my parents like that, because I don't know, I feel like my parents are great. Like I wouldn't be who I was without them. I wouldn't be able to spend so much time focusing on what I'm interested in without them. But I'm starting to question if that's because they've realized the upside of doing that, or if they just don't care. And jokingly before, I would tell people, most people in TKS have parents who are kind of on top of them all the time. I would tell people that, oh, my parents don't care what I do. But I actually think that's kind of more true now, where they just don't care what I get up to, as long as generally I'm happy. Which I think is good. It's great, but I think it means it's difficult for them to understand. Very difficult for me to get advice from them and for them to understand the challenges I face. Yeah, that's kind of what I realized. Like, so last week I had a very, very busy week. I did a mock trial tournament, which I prepared for a couple months. I had not a huge role in the team this year. Technically, I was an executive member, one of three, but that's just kind of seniority. Like the three of us were just happened to be on the team last year. Most people on the team last year graduated and left. But I had a decent sized role, especially in the defense side of the mock trial. So when you do a mock trial, you do crown and defense. I did closing on defense, and I did an examination, which means I kind of ran defense. I didn't really have a huge play in the crown, but I did coach a lot of the new students and coached especially the other execs, because I think I'm not necessarily good at mock trials or debating because like of some crazy preparing or research skills. Like I think it's literally, it just comes down to confidence a lot of the time and just knowing how to talk, and I think that like I did provide a decent amount of value from that, but prepared a few months for that, more than a few months, for a long time, just getting this team ready, trying to win the tournament because we came third last year on some nonsense when we think we should have done better. We did pretty well this year. We made the finals again, and the way it works is you physically go to the courthouse to do these competitions, and I did it over, and it's during school. So I last Wednesday was the first day at the courthouse doing this competition. If you make the finals, you go back to second day. We made the finals, which means I gotta miss another day of school. On the Thursday, which was the day of the finals, I also had a cricket tournament. Cricket was something I've been preparing for a long time too. Kind of become my sport. Lots of people in the school like cricket. Generally, they don't have a voice to have a cricket team, but we finally made a cricket team. I fell in love with the sport recently, and I was happy to represent my school in the cricket tournament. And the cricket tournament was during the day, and the mock trial finals were in the evening, which means I would have to miss another day of school anyway to go to the cricket tournament. The team did very well at the cricket tournament. I didn't play a lot, mostly because I just didn't have to, and then also other people wanted to play. I'm not necessarily like high up in the ranking of captaincy, so I'm not the captain. I'm within the high ranks of the captain, or at least how he looks at his people, which means generally when they're doing good, they'll put lower people or people who don't generally get to play in. But because it's our first tournament, that means I've never really played. I was in fielding for a bit. I never really got to bat, never got to bowl. So that was kind of weird. They ended up coming second overall in the tournament, which is huge win for the cricket team. Very impressive. I'm very proud of how we did. And then I went to the mock trial finals. After so long, I think we had a very good showing again, but we came third once again. It was a very good tournament overall. Third isn't bad at all. Third is very good, but we wanted to come first. But anyway, I say this because the night before, when I was telling my parents, specifically my mom, about, hey, this is what I did over the past day. Firstly, it was the first day of the mock trial tournament on Wednesday. How that went, how well we did, how well the defense did when I was on it. How I had the cricket tournament the next day. We had a very good showing earlier, very good practices. We're ready to go dominate. But then also, the night before when I was preparing, oh shit, oh my god, I forgot. Also on Wednesday, separately of everything else that was going on, was the Earthshot Finals, which means I went to my friend Anmol's house, who I did the challenge with, to actually physically present the finals, which means there's a very long day on Wednesday. Firstly, preparing for the mock trial, but then also the whole time the mock trial wasn't even my priority because I wanted to do well in Earthshots. But the night before, also, I got a message from Naveed, who runs DKS, pretty much inviting me to C2 Montreal, which is another conference, which is insane, to talk to CAE about my Pi GDS idea, which is insane. I think that's very, it's very cool, and it was a very cool message to get late at night before such a big day. And I didn't end up breaking the news until I got home to my parents after that day, and that's kind of when I started realizing that maybe they just don't care, or they don't understand kind of what's going on, because I came home after a long day. It was I think it was 10 or 11 at night when I got home from Anmol's house after presenting Pi. We made the finals on Pi. We did very well. We had just made the finals in OGen, and we had just came second in the cricket tournament, all from the past few days, and then I had that news to break. And then it kind of came up have school going on top of this for my parents. It was like, and then I explained to them, how hard I was working on that other stuff. And like, yeah, that's cool, but how's school? Which is just like, I don't think you get it. And I tried to explain to them and say, hey, like, this matters way more to me, and I'm learning and becoming a much better person way more because of this stuff. And when I told them about the conference, they physically said, like, hey, like, gotta do well in school or we won't let you go. And I was like, what the hell? Like, they don't understand or care about how I actually learn, how I actually grow as a person. Because they want me to kind of follow that path, which is fine. It's understandable, like, it doesn't make them mad, but it was a difficult realization for me that no, they don't really understand, they don't really care. So that was kind of weird and scary, because I almost always thought they kind of understood. They kind of saw the value, but when I realized like how much I had to explain to them, how much work I was putting into OGen finals, cricket finals, Earthshot finals, that they really didn't understand that I was doing that, and they didn't really care because they don't really take a massive interest in what I'm doing. So it almost means I'm on my own. But yeah, because there's like, when doing all of that, like 3 huge things, after finishing the 4th huge thing, which was Pi Challenge, and actually doing well, getting invited to that conference, it was like, there's physically not enough time in the day to do well in school at the same time as that. Like, I have my life scheduled to the half hour. There is not enough time to do that. And then even then, when I do that work, it ruins all of my other work. Like, it physically ruins me as a person. I just cannot do it. And even though I've started doing it after Earthshot ended, I'm realizing even more, like, this is just, it's just not good for me. But my parents don't get it. I don't know, maybe I have to do better communicating it or whatever, but it also means that I can go to just taking more ownership over it myself, which means I probably have to care less about what they think or what they say or what they think I should do, which is very hard. It's a very hard thing to do. But I'm 17 now, so I guess it's time to grow up, I guess. But I think generally most people don't do that until they're older. But it just kind of snuck up on me. I always thought that I could kind of rely on them, and I can definitely still rely on them, but gotta take it with a grain of salt, I guess. I don't know. We'll see how it works out. We'll see how it works with the whole C2 Montreal thing. Should be cool. It's another conference. Crazy I get to go to another conference. I think this one's all expenses paid and stuff in Montreal. I'll get to talk about making GDS better from the Pi Challenge with CAE, and should be cool. I guess I got the messages earlier in the video. I guess I'll read them now that I got from Naveed to see what the deal is. I'll grab my laptop. Let's see. He sent me a few, so I don't know. Okay, so I got added to the C2 Slack channel. I guess I'll look at that after to see who's in it. See who's going to be. Okay. so it looks like there's 4 other students doing talks. I'm doing a panel with CAE. Yeah, that was just kind of the message around it, which is cool. So I guess let's see who's in the C2 channel. No one I know yet, just a few directors. So that's very cool. So he says, update for you, I'll have final confirmation this week, but in the meantime it looks like this is a go. For me to go talk with CE, I'm going to add you to the C2 channel, and the others once they've confirmed with me. You'll be doing the panel with CE. There will also be 4 other students doing other talks. Let's go. So that should be cool. I already did a kind of a talk discussion with Shell. Compute I didn't even really work with before. They just kind of happened to work in the same area of AI I worked on for a bit. But I'm definitely way more connected with CAE, and I do want to work with them over the summer. But yeah, so that's cool. Cool update of what's going on. That's at the end of May. I think it's May 28th. Maybe I'll do my next update video from Montreal. Who knows? Because generally with at least the conferences I've gone to, you stay with people who are also doing talks and stuff there, which is always cool. But this one, it looks like CAE is paying for my flights and accommodations, so I wonder if I'll be by myself or not. I don't know. I hope I'm kind of with people, because that's always cool. But if I'm by myself, maybe I'll do my update from Montreal. But yeah, that's cool. So it's my 17th birthday. I don't know. I think I'll spend the day. I don't know. Talk to people. I kind of took the past few days for myself just to get rested, because I was super sleep deprived. I think I was sick. I definitely had a migraine. I don't know if that was because of a sickness or not, but I think I was just getting over that, so I needed some extra sleep. So don't really need that on my birthday. I can actually do stuff, which is cool. I think I might just work on purple hydrogen. I think I'll get my 3D printer going for another project that I kind of got involved with, a startup which is making fall detectors for elderly people that go in socks. So I'll get that going. It's also technically my 3D printer's birthday, which is, I got it 4 years ago, which is kind of my grand entrance into the tech and doing cool stuff world, instead of just thinking about it. So yeah, I think I'll get that running, work on some purple hydrogen, probably just work on some easy schoolwork, and be chilling from there. So yeah, I think that's very cool. Probably go shower, maybe do some math work, and then go to sleep, and then we'll see what the day brings tomorrow on my birthday, and we'll see what the month brings in terms of doing stuff, having a purpose, see what I get done. But I think May should be cool. Looking forward to summer. That's all I can say. Looking forward to summer. Doing my own stuff in the summer. But yeah, I think that's it for now. Cool channel, I guess. Keep going. I happen to do update every month, and that's kind of my personal newsletter and stuff, and kind of just dump. So yeah, I'll end it now. I don't know why I kept talking, but yeah, I'm ended it.